Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's Greater KW Chamber of Commerce Business Success Series presented by Manulife on hiring displaced talent to meet labor market needs. My name is Tara Bedard, and I'm the Executive Director at the Immigration Partnership of Waterloo Region, a long-standing partner and supporter of the Chamber. Before we get started, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that we live and work on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples as we seek a renewed relationship based on the foundation of mutual understanding and respect. As participants in today's virtual event, we are coming together as one. We believe everyone is free to be their true self and receive the same respect and opportunity regardless of age, ethnicity, gender, culture, identity, sexual orientation, beliefs, or language. We hope you will join us in fostering a positive environment here today that is a safe and welcoming space for all. We know there is more that we can do, and we are committed to listening and learning and growing as we go. Today's session would not be possible without the continued support of our sponsors. A special thank you to our title sponsor for the Business Success Series, Manulife, the platinum sponsor for the series, the Immigration Partnership of Waterloo Region, and June's sponsor, Learners. These organizations are committed to supporting our local economy and providing businesses with the resources and tools they need to thrive. Just before the session starts, I'd like to go over a few quick reminders. Please ensure that your microphone is muted throughout the presentation so we can reduce any background noise. If you have a tech-related question, please comment in the chat section and a representative of our team will get back to you momentarily. If you have a question for today's speakers, they will be gathered throughout the session and our speakers will do their best to answer as many questions as possible following the presentation portion of today. All attendees will be sent a recording of today's presentation and it will also be made available on the Greater KW Chamber website. I would now like to invite Mark Evans, Associate Lawyer with Learners LLP, to introduce today's guests.
Thank you, Tara. Learners is proud to be this month's presenting sponsor of the Business Success Series. I have the privilege of introducing today's guests, Lara Dyer and Basil Ramley. Lara Dyer is Canada Director for Talent Beyond Boundaries, an international nonprofit organization that helps employers recruit refugees and other displaced talent to meet their labor needs. Prior to joining TBB, Lara worked in the Government of Canada. In particular, Lara was a director for Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada and was instrumental in pioneering the Economic Mobility Pathways pilot, Canada's approach to displaced talent mobility. Basil Ramley is the co-founder and EMPP lead at Jumpstart Refugee Talent, where he oversees employer engagement. Prior to entering the nonprofit world, Basil worked in banking and consulting. Thank you for joining us today, and I will now pass it back to Tara.
Thank you so much for that, Mark. And Laura and Basil, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to hop into then the presentation portion of today's webinar. We have a series of 8 different questions that we're going to work through that will talk about various aspects of the work that you do in supporting displaced talent. And then we will hopefully have a little bit of time left at the end for a bit of a Q&A based on some of the audience engagement. Laura, I'll start with you. It's really nice to meet you. Can you please provide us with a little overview of the Economic Mobility Pathways Pilot, or EMPP?
Great. Thanks, Tara and Mark, and thanks so much for having us. We're thrilled to be here. The Economic Mobility Pathways Pilot really allows Canadian employers to recruit talent internationally, but specifically for or within the global refugee talent pool. So it was started in 2018 as a very small proof of concept kind of pilot project, and started with about a dozen candidates and 5 provinces and territories that were interested to look at whether this concept could work. And based on the success of that proof of concept in phase 1, it moved into a second phase. So basically, though, it's a series of facilitative measures that are applied alongside Canada's economic immigration pathways that just provide, that basically kind of level the playing field so that refugees can apply for economic immigration on par with any other candidate. So an example would be that EMPP provides in lieu of a passport for those refugees that don't have a passport anymore or they don't have a valid passport. IRCC will provide a different way for them to travel to Canada. And also, as you can imagine, many refugees were not able to pull their degree off the wall or grab their transcripts as they had to flee for safety. And so EMPP also allows for some facilitation measures around that kind of need in order to demonstrate that they meet the economic criteria.
That's excellent. Thank you so much. It's really interesting, innovative, and important program that Canada is developing. Lara, can you speak a little bit to the need for this program, the why? What is the difference between this program and other existing programs that Immigration Canada has for people to come into the country? Like, what are maybe some of the barriers that people might be able to overcome in other programs that don't exist in this one?
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you so much. So I think many people would know that there are millions and millions of people who are currently displaced. And I think the UNHCR's latest number was 100 million people that are currently displaced globally. And so many of those do require humanitarian resettlement, whether because of the trauma that they have gone through or other reasons. They really need to pursue traditional humanitarian resettlement. But within that, vast number of people, there are lots of folks who do have skills and education and training that Canada desperately needs. I heard an estimation recently that there are 1 million job vacancies currently in Canada. So we usually describe it as a bit of an hourglass where there's lots of employer demand and need for labor here in Canada. And then there's lots of talent overseas in the refugee population. But what hasn't been able to happen is that sort of connector in between. And so EMPP really is that connector where it allows refugees that have the economic or can meet the economic criteria. It allows them to apply for economic immigration just like anyone else. Because it does accommodate for some of the differences like not having a passport or not having copies of their credentials. And so there are workarounds and facilitation measures that are offered through the EMPP that basically make it possible for refugees to apply. And without those facilitation measures, we have excellent, skilled, wonderful people abroad who would not be able to come to Canada and meet our labor market needs here.
Almost sounds too good to be true. Definitely strong need in the global refugee and displaced persons population for this program, because we know that there are not enough resettlement spaces globally to meet the demands. And we certainly feel in Waterloo Region and all of the outreach that we do with employers and through the chamber community, the need for talent. So the coming together of these two things, I think, is absolutely brilliant. Basil, I'd like to turn it over to you right now to start to speak a little bit more to the nuts and bolts for any of the businesses or employers in Waterloo Region who might be interested in looking at getting involved in this program. Can we start by talking about the types of refugee talent that you work with?
I need to unmute myself. So yes, absolutely. We do work with a very diverse talent pool. So we currently have, just so everybody has an idea, we currently have just over 42,000 candidates in our database. These are tech professionals, So we have around 3,000 candidates from the tech sector, from software engineering, cloud engineering, AI, and so on. We have some 4,000 engineers, civil, mechanical, electrical. We have a lot of trades professional from manufacturing, construction, transportation. So we have actually just over 12,000 trades professional. We have a lot of healthcare workers as well. So basically just a very diversified talent pool. And we do source historically, most of these candidates come from the Middle East. So through Talent Beyond Boundary, we have offices in Jordan and Lebanon that support the refugees on the ground there. But we've been a lot more proactive in approaching new regions. So there is now a new office in Mexico City, overseeing and supporting candidates from Central and South America. We're also being more proactive in approaching new regions in South Asia and Eastern Europe as well. So we're constantly looking to diversify the talent pool and further expand it. Actually, our very, very first candidate that we helped bring and relocate to Canada was hired by Waterloo-based startup, a Kitchener one, at Bonfire. So he was a software developer. He came as part of this initial phase one in the pilot where it was just a small test, and this year now we're expanding it and working more on it. And he arrived back in mid 2018, and he's still currently now employed with Bonfire, just into a more senior role. But that just to give you a little bit of an idea about the pool that we're working with.
Thank you. That was like a really good overview, and so proud that we were one of the first in terms of communities engaging with this program here in Waterloo Region through our business community. Next, can you talk about we always get questions from employers like, how do we navigate the programs? Do you provide immigration support for businesses that might be looking to go through this process?
Yes, we do. We realize that this process can be quite complicated for a lot of employers. So throughout the entire program, you will see that we've really cultivated these strong partnerships to make it as seamless as we can for the employers and the candidates as well. So when it comes to immigration, we're currently working with Fragment. And Fragment is a global immigration consultancy firm. It's actually the largest in the world that specializes also in corporate immigration. They operate in over 100 countries. So they've seconded a full-time immigration consultant on our team that helps ensure that the roles we're working with employers meet the immigration pathways requirements, that the candidates we're putting forward meet these requirements. And then they also, for any employer that wishes to use Fragment as their preferred immigration consultant, they offer also pro bono rates. So they are currently just charging $4,000, so $4,000 to $4,500 for any employer, which is a pro bono rate. This is about 50% discount than what they usually charge for any employer that is looking to hire refugee talent through EMPP. So Ayana, who's our immigration consultant, she's extremely experienced in this program now. So she would help walk the employer and the candidate through all the requirements, make sure that we have everything on file. She would then file for immigration for the visa applications, both on the provincial stage and the federal stage, and constantly just provide updates on the progress and what is happening. So the employer has usually the choice of either doing that piece in-house if they wish to do that, or if they work with a preferred immigration consultant. But if they prefer to take advantage of Fragment's expertise and their pro bono rates with EMPP, that is something we always encourage, and it really just makes the process very, very easy. Well, as easy as it can be when it comes to immigration.
I guess that's a good qualifier. Immigration is definitely complicated here in Canada and around the world. So that's great to hear that support is available for employers, because it is definitely a number one concern as we are talking with those who are looking to hire any talent from abroad, how they're going to facilitate that. Basil, can we talk about, are there specific regions or industries in Canada that you support or anything like that?
Yeah, so we do work currently with different provinces, with the exception of Alberta and Quebec. So these are the two provinces that are yet to participate in EMPP, but we're seeing a lot of demands from employers in those two regions or these two provinces, and we're constantly now advocating with the appropriate governments to hopefully have them join us. But in Ontario is currently participating in the program. So the way that we do it is we usually leverage existing immigration pathways. So for instance, in Ontario, let's say it's in Cambridge-Kitchener-based business, we would be leveraging the OINP immigration stream for those that are aware of it. But when it comes to industries and sectors, we can really support industries and sectors across the board. We're seeing the most demand and from tech, mostly trades and healthcare.
I think that aligns a lot with the types of industries that we see looking for talent also here in Waterloo region. Definitely a lot in our tech, the trades, manufacturing. So that's good to know that you have, kind of broad supports available across a range of industries available to support businesses that might be seeking talent from these global pools. Can you talk about the candidates a little bit, Basil? Do they receive any additional supports, those who come through this program, such as settlement or other types of supports?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do provide a lot of various support to the candidates. It's starting usually where we do what we call intakes, providing them with some support when we review their resumes, help them customize it a little bit more to Canadian standards and so on. And then when there is an interview process that is happening, we also provide some support to the candidates in the form of mock interviews, especially around behavioral questions, where these things do vary from one region to another and one culture to another. So there is that level of support that we initially do. Obviously, we do also the immigration support, but then also more importantly, in many cases, is the settlement support. So this is when the candidate arrives in the country. We do work closely initially with the employer. So we do have a settlement officer on our team who focuses and specializes in this. And she will usually work closely with the employer around identifying some temporary accommodation. We ask employer to provide normally 4 weeks of temporary accommodation for when the candidate and their family arrives. This is just to give them a little bit of something or some safety, some security for the meantime as they find and as they search for something that is a little bit more long-term. But there are other issues that usually they need support with. So we help connect them with sponsorship groups, settlement organizations, community organizations in the regions they're at. And this is to help, for instance, enroll their kids at school, get their IDs ready, enroll their partner at an ESL school. So we've cultivated these partnerships with the various organizations in different regions to ensure that they have that level of support, of wraparound support, and the knowledge that they need. We also a lot of time will ask employers to have an informal buddy system where somebody could be matched with one of their employees. They'll also offer things, some information that are not necessarily available at work, so things that are not related to work. So where can I buy pita bread, for example, in Kitchener? And I would imagine the answer is almost anywhere. But all these kind of questions is we usually try to ensure that there is a capacity to support the candidate for it.
That all sounds really great. I mean, the connections for people who then arrive here, candidates, in work and out in the community, we know are both really, really important. So it's good to hear that you help employers working through this program to be able to, kind of look beyond, the person's role in their company and, get the supports they need to be successful in the community and in the workplace overall. I'm going to dig a little further on that. Does any of that, so that all kind of centered around the candidate and the types of supports they need. What about the employers? As we know, more diversity comes into organizations, some employers may need a little bit of support in terms of, how they grow and change with a changing workforce. Is there any element of the program that helps to address some of that for employers who might be interested?
There really is. So we do offer, so initially we have a lot of resources from the right from the beginning on how to interview, things to keep in mind of when interviewing these candidates, which are quite standard normally. But then when the candidate arrives in the country, we do provide 12 months of ongoing support where we schedule regular check-ins for employers that don't have a lot of experience with DEI, with diversity in the workforce. We also have some programs that we make available for them, training programs that is for management or for staff to help them just understand a little bit better what it means to have a more diversified, things to keep in mind when dealing with other populations and other groups, demographic groups. So we do want to make sure that the employer and their workforce, their employees, have all the support they need to really ensure that this is a smooth integration.
Okay, that's amazing. I'm going to turn now back to costs. And I think you spoke a little bit to some of this, at least a little bit earlier, but for businesses looking to engage in these programs, cost is a factor. What are the costs associated with hiring internationally? And are there any additional costs to consider when hiring displaced talent?
Absolutely. So there are some costs that would be associated with this program. They just still make it some relatively competitive compared to other programs when it comes to workforce mobility. The way I would categorize it is really there are these pockets. So there's the government processing fee, and these are usually for the provincial nominee program that employers would usually expect to incur. In Ontario, that's $2,000. Some other provinces have lower fees. Ontario is the highest. But that would be a $2,000 fee paid to the provincial government. Then there is also the right of PR, because all the candidates that we're working with arrive as permanent residents with a clear pathway to citizenship. So the employer is not going to be concerned about a temporary work permit expiring or a PR application being rejected. So there's a PR fee that ranges, depending on the family size, from $515 to $1,000. So that can take it up to $3,000 on the government processing fees. Aside from that, really, it just comes down to the immigration consultancy and the employer's preference. If they do it in-house, that's one thing. So there is really no additional fees that would be associated with it. If they wish to go with Fragaman, for instance, which we usually highly recommend, then there would be an additional fee of $4,000 to $4,500, depending on how many dependents there are in that family. But it's capped at $4,500. And then the other fee would be around just temporary accommodation. So we do ask employers to cover 4 weeks of temporary accommodation, and that cost can vary. So many employers that we work with already have existing relocation packages that they offer candidates. So that would just be built into their process. For those that don't, it would just be an additional cost usually that they can expect to incur. And again, it depends on the family size, the location that they're coming to. But aside from that, we're a charitable organization at TBP, so we do, and we currently do not charge any recruitment fees. These are completely waived for employers that are participating. We do raise revenue from other corporate philanthropic efforts, but employers are always very encouraged to provide a donation, an optional donation for the program, to which they would get tax receipts. And there is actually one thing to keep in mind, that currently flights for candidates and their family are being comped. So they're, regardless of the family size, they're being offered complimentary through another partner that we have in the program called Miles for Migrants. So they're covering all those fees. So let's say, give an example of an individual who's coming to Kitchener-Waterloo region, Cambridge, Waterloo region, and they would anticipate to, an employer would anticipate to pay basically $3,000 for, or actually $2,500 for immigration processing fees, an additional $4,000 potentially for immigration consultancy fees, and then just a temporary accommodation.
Okay, that's a great overview. You mentioned that a lot of the employers that you work with already have relocation packages in place that they have for their recruitment work. If there's a company that doesn't have that already that might be interested in exploring this program, like can you just talk really quickly through what are the typical elements that you see in there? And do you have a ballpark in terms of what those costs might look like on average?
Yeah, so we've seen it where it varies greatly from one employer to another, the level of services that they would like to offer a candidate when it comes to a relocation package, which again are optional. And usually it can vary because some employers might offer relocation sign-up bonus, for instance, to cover cost of bringing in certain furnitures that would usually not be made available otherwise. You cannot carry them on a flight. So freight and transportation is one fee that many employers opt to make available. Temporary accommodation, the duration of the temporary accommodation can vary from one employer to another. We've had some employers that extend a car rental for a month or two, so they cover car rental fees just until that candidate is able to settle and then find a car that they can purchase if needed. So it can vary. However, we also have a partnership with YCART. So YCART is a workforce mobility, a global workforce mobility service provider that would be also offering very competitive rates for any employers that are just looking to make it easy for themselves and just opt to provide additional services, but they don't really want to go in and customize these services on their own and make these payments differently. So they can just sit with YCART and choose one of the different packages that they have, and they would receive a discounted rate, basically.
Okay, that's amazing. And I guess one last question until we start to look at any questions that might be coming in from any of the viewers. Basil, do you have any advice for employers who are looking to hire and relocate displaced talent?
Yes, absolutely. So I just want employers to always keep in mind that when you're hiring refugees, it's not a charity case. You're finding and you're relocating some highly qualified talent. And on top of that, these are individuals who are very versatile. They're very, we've seen a lot of high level of loyalty because they're very grateful for the opportunity that they were extended by that employer, and they just want that opportunity to prove themselves. And on top of that, this is also a program. The Economic Mobility Pathways Pilot is a program that has really been very carefully curated, and we're looking to make it as easy as possible for the employer to participate and be able to hire and relocate displaced talent. So as I mentioned, the process itself, there are different steps to it, but to summarize it very quickly and just to show how simple it could be is just we'll sit down with the employer. They would let us know, I'd like to hire for these 3 roles. Our immigration consultant will have a quick look at them, ensure that they're eligible for the appropriate immigration pathway. Once that is approved, which takes a couple of days usually to get that done, we will create a candidate shortlist that we will put forward to the employer. From there, we want to accommodate the recruitment / interviewing process that the employer might have, a number of virtual interviews, technical assessments, cognitive assessments. So we do provide that support and we facilitate that work. And we do support the candidate, as I had mentioned earlier, when it comes to mock interviews. The interview process is done. An employer wishes to issue a job offer. We take on and provide all the support needed for the immigration process as well. And then we do all the settlement support and the post-settlement support that we also mentioned, the 12 months of ongoing support to both candidates. So I do want employers to really take advantage of this program that is just made available there to help address those chronic talent shortages and create this win-win situation. You're bringing in highly qualified talent, and you're also extending an opportunity to candidates, to individuals, to families that are currently struggling in countries that have a lot more barriers due to various reasons when they're there. So yeah, I'd be very happy to do to really carry this conversation with different employers one-on-one, explore it in further detail, learn a little bit more about their hiring needs. But yeah, I'm happy to take any questions now after that too.
And Lara, as we're waiting for any questions to come in, do you have any kind of wrap up words that you'd like to share before we dig into like specific questions from the audience?
Yeah, I was just answering a question or making a comment on a comment in the chat. So I think I would just reinforce something that Basil said in terms of this is really economic immigration. And so we are not asking any employer to hire refugee talent as a humanitarian effort. It's obviously a win-win where there is that humanitarian component and it's, you know, making the world a better place. But really the primary reason to work with us and hire refugees with us would be because it meets your labor market needs. And that's as much for you as the employers, but it also gives our candidates a new kind of lease on life that they're able to work in a profession that they have invested in. So their education and training is aligned, and we hear often from our candidates that this gives them back a sense of dignity and hope, and gives them an opportunity to kind of, you know, rebuild their lives and really think about what their hopes and dreams are once they come to Canada.
That's amazing. I guess the first question is, I guess it can be it can seem hard, I guess, if you're amongst the first to step forward into trying something new, and this is a relatively new program. We've heard about one company, like the first company that brought in talent to Canada through this program here in Waterloo Region. How many employers are you working with? Like, you're trying to build a global movement of looking at like different ways of viewing displaced talent and addressing refugee situations. How many employers have you been working with to date? And like, how quickly are you seeing this grow in terms of a new way of, on the one hand, helping displaced people find a new place in a new part of the world in the labor market, and on the other hand, for employers who are working really hard to address their talent needs?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe I can take that question. So we've been working now with some over 50, actively working with over 50 employers, again, from very diverse sectors and industries. We've got a lot of interest from also other industries, from other regions, from other employers. We've pitched to a lot more as well. So we're seeing a lot of demands from through the partnerships that we're having with what we're calling strategic partners. So we're working very closely with associations and business councils, such as the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce here. So we're really hoping to further expand on the employers that we have access to. And we're trying to take full advantage of opportunities like this very same one here that we're on today to access and let more employers know about our messaging. So initially, like I mentioned, in 2018, there was the phase one in the pilot, but it's this year in 2022 that we're launching phase two that is larger. We're looking now to bring in 500 refugees over the next few months. So we're really hoping to be able to achieve that by just accessing more and more employers.
That's awesome. And it sounds like you provide a pretty comprehensive suite of kind of support services to employers or businesses who are looking to engage through this program, which is amazing. On the other side of that maybe is, learning from others who have gone before. Is there any element of the supports that you provide to new employers who are getting engaged with your program of connecting them with other businesses that might have already gone through this process, that ability to talk to somebody who's kind of walked their shoes and learn in a less structured, maybe kind of peer mentoring type of way? Is that a part of what you do as well?
We've had some employers ask us about that, and we're always very happy to do that kind of match. It's not necessarily structured in the program itself, but it's something that we're always very happy to provide. Actually, one of the employers that we're working with in Cornwall, a small town or a large town in Eastern Ontario called Sigma Point. has hired a couple of candidates, and now they're back in the process of hiring some more candidates through EMPP. Their president slash CEO became such a big fan of the program and a champion of it that he also joined the board of director of Talent Beyond Boundary, and he has these conversations with different employers that are looking to participate in the program. Discusses his own experience and Sigma Points' experience with it, and it's an engineering firm over there. So similarly, we could have a bonfire, for instance, their CEO, Omar, or somebody from their team, also sit down with different employers in the Cambridge, Waterloo region to discuss their own experience, what went well for them, what were potentially some challenges that they saw, how did they try to overcome it. So we do want to create that shared knowledge space to really help employers overcome any potential challenges.
Okay.
I think, Tara, if I can just build on that. So really the end goal is that displaced people can move around the world just like anybody else. And so what we are focused on primarily is working with governments to remove barriers that would prevent refugees and other displaced people from being able to move on the basis of their skills. And there's lots of take up of this idea. We're present obviously in Canada, but also the UK and Australia, and we're moving our program into other countries in Europe. So it's something that I think employers and governments and all of the stakeholders see as a bit of a no-brainer. So it's just a question of figuring out what are the barriers that exist for displaced talent in the various countries, and removing those while keeping the economic criteria very much in place, because we know that those are important for the employers. And so we do the recruitment piece to facilitate employers hiring, but also to demonstrate that the idea works, and to be able to use that to encourage governments to open up their economic immigration pathways even more. And I think you alluded to earlier that international immigration is not easy, not for the employer, nor for the candidate, but we definitely work with employers to come alongside them and support them as much as is needed. And I just wanted to pick up on a point that Khaled is making in the chat, which is such an important one, and that is around financing. And so Basil mentioned sort of the costs for working with us and hiring through us. And we do ask the employers to pay as much of the talent recruitment costs as they can, because they will benefit from the talent in the end, and it'll help them to grow their business or keep their business open in some cases. And so we do think that that is a fair trade-off. But there are other costs associated that are borne mostly by candidates who haven't yet had a job offer. And so we also are looking for, I guess I would say, kind of refugee sensitive financing options. Another one of our partners is Windmill Microlending, and they are a partner that has been providing loans to refugees that are already in Canada for many, many years. And one of the innovations under the EMPP is that they are now able to provide those loans to refugees that are coming through EMPP as well. And we also have another initiative called the Pathway Club, which is another way that individual candidates can apply for some financing for the costs that are more individual to them, and could include sort of upgrading their language levels and that kind of thing to make them more competitive when they're applying, let's say, to jobs in Canada.
That's amazing. To take that just, I guess, a little bit further, other questions that we hear a lot when we're doing our work with employers is around language capacity and ability to integrate into an English language work environment. Can you speak to the language proficiency of people who are in the tool, or do you have other things that support, from a language perspective, people's integration into the workplaces that they come into?
Yeah, absolutely. So the one part of our work is the employer engagement and helping employers to hire. The kind of nonprofit side of our business, which is why we do work on a donation basis, is that we are also working with those 42,000 people in our database to, let's say, to upgrade their CV so that it is competitive for the Canadian labor market. I think Basil mentioned that we do mock interviews. So if any of your employers are interested in volunteering with us to do mock interviews for candidates, that would be also another way to partner with us, which is super valuable to our candidates. And then also language training and some of those things that even we're starting to see some academic upgrading that's being offered overseas now that this idea of refugee labor mobility is catching on. So in terms of TBB's programming, we really do encourage all of our clients, so the 42,000 in our database, to have an IELTS level of at least 4.5. So in case your employers can speak IELTS, that's a good level for being able to function effectively in a workplace. And we do consider that an important piece of not only being competitive in job interviews and that kind of thing, but also upon arrival, being able to settle well, integrate well into the workplace and also into the community. Basil touched on this a little bit, but I'll just reiterate that because our clients are coming in as economic immigrants, they are eligible for the full suite of settlement services that are offered through IRCC and their partners. So that includes language training and other services, including for the partner, the spouse, and children. So there are services that are available for the whole family once those individuals arrive in Canada.
That's amazing. I don't think I heard it earlier. For anybody who's considering getting engaged with this, and I know that every situation is unique, but is there like a typical time that it might take from start to end if somebody's wanting to hire through this program? Kind of what kind of timeline are businesses looking at?
Okay.
Yeah. So do you want to? Yep. Okay. Go ahead.
So with the processing timeline, so once we have the job description, it usually takes now just under 4 weeks for us to put forward candidates to the role. For some of the roles where we're actively putting candidates forward, it could be a lot shorter than that. From there, it really is just a timing. It's about the immigration process itself. So currently it's just taking over 6 months, so it can take 6 to 9 months for that process itself to be done, while keeping in mind that these candidates are not coming, as we have mentioned, as temporary workers. They're coming as PR. So in relative terms to existing PR pathways, this processing timeline is actually quite competitive, because initially it can sound, especially for somebody that doesn't do a lot of international hiring and global workforce mobility, that it's quite a long processing timeline, but it's actually quite competitive in comparison to existing PR pathways.
Okay, that's good. So it's not like an immediate, they're going to be here tomorrow, but you're thinking forward for, I guess, your talent pipeline and what you're going to be needing a little bit out in the future. This is a good option for people to consider.
Exactly. And we're seeing that really work very well for what we could be calling the evergreen roles. So you're a tech employer, you know that you constantly have hiring needs for software developers, for solution architects, for instance. So if it's really well, you're a manufacturer, you know you always need some CNC machine operators, for instance. So this is where it really fits well. But yes, if you need somebody to start next month or tomorrow, it would not be necessarily the most suitable program for it.
Okay, that's perfect. And there's one more question that I'd like to touch on. When you were listing the profile of candidates and the types of skills and abilities that they have in the professions that they're in, there's a number of kind of regulated professions on that list, and we know that that can be a really challenging thing for immigrants in Canada coming with qualifications in some of the regulated professions. What does this mean for employers who are looking to hire, like, the engineers or people in like regulated trades? How does that work once people are here.
Do you want to start, Basil, and I can
Yeah, absolutely.
add on?
So it would really depend on the occupation itself. What the advantage here is we do, so two things. One is we would still have to adhere to a provincial immigration requirement, to licensing requirement that might be included in what is called the NOC code usually. And however, we do have, as I mentioned, our own immigration consultant on the team that would usually be able to provide that feedback to the employer, make suggestions on how to still perhaps look for maybe a similar role that you could start this candidate with a slightly different requirement, have them develop the right not necessarily a skill set, but maybe give them some time to get the licensing that are required for it, and potentially have them transition into that role, which could be more senior perhaps, but we would be able to really provide and walk the employer and provide them with a little bit more suggestions on how to navigate that.
Maybe I'll just add a special initiative that we're working on is in healthcare, because obviously there's huge needs in healthcare right across the country, and licensing is a key issue. So we do already have a pilot project in our UK office that is working very, very well, and we're trying to have it sort of imported and adapted to the Canadian context. And that is that our candidates come into the UK and they work right away in a hospital environment as the equivalent of a personal support worker. So usually they're internationally trained nurses who come in as a personal support worker, but then they're supported with academic upgrading as well as on-the-job mentoring. And there's an assessment that is done in the workplace. And when the individuals are ready, then they are promoted to a nursing position. And that's happening usually in 12 weeks or less that process is completed. Whereas in Canada, depending on the province or territory, it can take, years for sure. So we are working with long-term care homes and hospitals. And so if any of your employers would fit those two categories, we'd be delighted to hear from you and to include you in that special initiative, which is a long way from hiring at the moment as nurses, but we are looking at what that model might look like in Canada. But for the time being, what we're doing is bringing, again, nurses in as personal support workers. And then once they're here, we're working with the employer and the appropriate licensing body to try to make sure that they're connected to the existing processes and programs and other supports that they can take advantage of to have their credentials recognized and be able to work in their field and in a way that's respectful of the training that they've already undertaken. So I guess I would say our program is not just about finding any job for a displaced person, but really finding a job that is aligned with the training and expertise that they already have, and that is, respectful of their aspirations for their careers and the salary, that is appropriate for the level of investment that they've already made in their human capital.
That's amazing. I think we're kind of close to the end of time, and I think we've touched on many of the burning questions. Is there any one last thing that you'd like to share before I start to wrap us up? Or we're good? Okay, so thank you so much. This was a really good discussion and overview of what sounds like a really comprehensive program to support employers through the process of hiring displaced talent from abroad in Canada, and delving into the level of strategy on talent strategies, and kind of working through the levels of how you bring people in at different places and spaces and work towards where they ultimately want to be, and where you want them to be as an employer in your business. So Lara and Basil, thank you so much for joining us today. That brings us to the end of today's session. So I'd like to just say thank you again to the title sponsors for the Business Success Series, Manulife, to the Platinum sponsors for the series, the Immigration Partnership of Waterloo Region, and to June's sponsor, Learners. Finally, to everybody on the call who has joined in or who will be watching this after, thank you so much. As a reminder, the Greater KW Chamber of Commerce hosts Business Success Series webinars every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Managing the Great Resignation and keeping track of the latest privacy requirements can be overwhelming and challenging to navigate. Join us next week as Ian McLean, who we'll all miss today, speaks with employment lawyer George Hamzo and privacy lawyer Alicia Christian as they answer your questions and help guide some of your critical business decisions. To register or find out more about other upcoming events, please visit greaterkwchamber.com. Please share this series with your friends and colleagues. Join every Wednesday afternoon for the next edition of the Greater KW Chamber of Commerce Business Success Series, brought to you by title sponsor Manulife, Platinum sponsor Immigration Partnership of Waterloo Region, and June sponsor Learners. Because if it's Wednesday, it's the Business Success Series. Thank you so much.